All right, let's start wrapping it up. We've got a mic that we'll pass around so that you can share what you found in your groups. And since this group here in the middle wanted no time, I figure you're done. So we're gonna nominate you first.
Volunteers? We'll go first. All right, I've coined our team's name is the KISS team. Digital transformation, we want to keep it as simple as you can. Okay? Let's see, what issues limit your ability to scale or to use digital transformation? We spoke about culture, and that is an older plant, maybe an older staff that's hard to get people to use digital transformation, as an example mine. The business need, do you really have a driver to even change your plant and go to digital transformation? And people don't see the value in doing it. So that's really the issue there. And let's see, large-scale companies need to focus on a single issue so they can maybe have a chance of getting things done. That's it.
Is that all you went through all the questions? Or you just
you going with all three of them? All right.
Yeah, that way we just do one and everybody does all.
How do you use digital transformation to improve? Trying to be responsive to the customer, engineering data for a useful way, and making it simple and make it simplification. That's the real drive for it. And you make it in a useful way to display it. All right, number 3, the metrics. Do you use metrics? Some of the individuals said they do. Let's see, they use benchmarks. Well, that's not it. They use it for production, reliability, the number of users, number of systems, use cases. They track pilots and the completion on going to digital transformation. Number 4, how important is return on investment, justifications of digital transformation, and how to get it approved? Let's see, benchmarking was one of them. See what other people are doing and see what your competition is doing. And justification, see about production increases, maybe make some savings or even cost less. Or digital justification sometimes is even hard to get people to understand, and you might even increase your reliability, just track your failures. And lastly, how do you keep up with the sustainability of digital transformation? It's really a culture change. You want people to have ownership behind it. Talked about maybe education, maybe some kind of awards, publications, and you're trying to get people to adopt digital transformation. That's it.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, who wants to go next? Okay, do I need to assign somebody? You go next, right here.
We failed. We didn't come up with a team name, so I don't know. We'll call ourselves Team Bubbly or something. I don't know. All right, so sorry. Our issues what issues limit our ability to scale digital transformation initiatives? Getting the dollars to invest in what we need to do to scale appropriately. A lot of times, I guess, we're not getting the right budget, and so we start and then we can't continue. Big one is around the resources needed to do the job are also doing other jobs, and they don't get freed up to help scale or drive it further. Just challenges with business practices, operating procedures, that are different among the different plants, so getting it to scale doesn't always mesh. So, and then understanding the different initiatives and being able to prioritize them and get the focus at the enterprise level is another challenge. And then there was a bunch that you guys said, so won't repeat those. Number 2, how does your organization use digital transformation to improve responsiveness to customers? So One of the things that we said is, one of the ways you can do it is to help verify claims. When customers make claims, can we actually verify what happened, where it happened, maybe even help do advanced notifications if we identify something at scale, or identify if it's not actually a production problem, it's something environmental or an installation problem faster. So around the supply chain, merging what's happening in the manufacturing plant with what's happening in the warehouse or your suppliers as well. So you have a much broader set of data. Sorry, I cannot read my own handwriting, so it really helps move to more objective decision making and provides transparency, which I think is a really big important thing, especially when we talk about democratization of data and analytics and making it more broadly adopted. And identify the main requirements that are shared across, going back to, again, sharing what's scalable across all the businesses, but also being able to help and support what needs to be done locally. We'll move on to number 3 around what metrics does your organization use to measure digital transformation initiatives? So productivity, OpEx reduction, talked about safety. I like what the gentleman Daniel over here said from Suncor. One of the things, the metrics, is identifying them up front and then removing the money from the budget so that the business has to engage and has to follow through if they've agreed to it, so that the money's already gone, so that they really want to get it because they won't have that money. Talk about digitalization KPIs, so what's being done, how's the progress on what they're doing, and what savings are they seeing and achieving. And then speed to new product introduction and ability to drive the greenfield plant builds online, get them online faster. And I think that was key there. Did I miss anything? Because I can't read my handwriting. 4, how important is ROI justification for digital transformation initiatives, and what strategies do you use to obtain approval? So ROI justification. Some people talked about compliance, and then also, how we're able to achieve like compliance, like environmental compliance, regulatory compliance, so forth. Then also link the economics, the financials, doing SWOT analysis on the smaller projects to make sure that we can actually make them and get them to scale. Productivity is always a big ROI justification. Like, are we getting productivity, quality, throughput? Safety, again, how does this help reduce incidents, put people in dangerous situations? Then we said, some people talked about, things around how do we, what do we want to say? What strategies do we use? Like getting the top down, driving it from top down leadership, trying to get some standards that are scalable, and then focusing on what work needs to be, what should be done, and then what work should we stop doing? If they're so important that what things aren't as important when you prioritize that to free up the resources. So I think that was, the other thing we said was ROI can actually be a barrier when we're trying to do pilot projects. So is ROI actually something that we should be focusing on as we're trying to do this, or should we focus on the value of the learnings and the ability to whether get to success or learn from something and fail and stop doing something? So 5, how does sustainability factor into digital transformation initiatives? I think that's probably like one of the more critical things, and we can argue about that, and we won't get into that argument too much. But the big thing is, people talk about what's in it for me, and not being me personally, but what's in it for the people who you're selling this to in the plant, the operators, leadership, making sure that they see that value and see it, so they want to sustain it and maintain it. Communication, messaging, making sure there's an ROI and then having a way to verify utilization and keeping it going. Teaching those who are going to use it to fish, but keeping it simple enough, focusing on the key variables and metrics. I don't know how many of you people see like go into a plant in the operations room and there's like 9 screens and one guy, and you're asking, how does some guy with 2 eyes look at 9 screens with 1,000 variables on each one? So that doesn't make sense so much. What else do we have here? Focus on the key variables, but providing them smart, actionable insights. So it's not just about giving them those couple red, yellow, green, or red, greens, however, but also making sure that they have the right actions to take when those things pop up. Make sure that you have a way so that when you bring new people in, they onboard properly, and that everyone has some form of ownership in doing this. If you have people, unless you make an autonomous plant, which tomorrow or Wednesday at 4:00 you can see Apostolos' presentation at 4, and he had some great insights on that, so you should go see it.
There you go. Got a plug for another session. That's awesome.
Am I allowed? Was that in the do not do?
No,
Was that the
it's
do not do's?
Okay, so I also can't read my notes, and my voice is going out, so forgive me. But we had an interesting discussion, and I think all of it is about the same, is that we're in similar places as companies, is how we're trying to get through this. When we look at limits to scale, we all have pockets of success. And if you do a proof of concept at one place, another place may not accept it because it wasn't their proof of concept, right? And so we have cultural issues that we're all trying to battle with. IT infrastructure seems to be an issue. The more we want to do with digital, the less adequate our IT infrastructure is. And often our economics are not enough to justify actually scaling it up. So we can prove something, but it's hard to extrapolate that out into big savings for the company. And then I think a big thing is competing priorities. If you have only a handful of people who are full-time working on digital transformation, it's going to be hard to have success without third parties and so forth, because there's always, the fire of the day that has to be taken care of. Which unit went down, which pump had a problem, that sort of thing. When we look at customers, we have a few different things here where we have one group that's focused on getting the data to the customers faster, more efficient, more complete. And then actually at my company, we have our R&D department that works with the customers to help them improve the use of our materials. So that it's a win-win on that situation. And using a gateway to do that or going to the customer site, but actually having access to their data, which is almost unheard of in the industry. And when we look at the metrics, to pull this up, sorry. The metrics, the completeness of work is something that's important when we're doing projects like fabrication and construction, trying to get it on time to the customer. And on-stream time improvements. I think that's one of the biggest things that we look at as chemical and oil and gas is how long can we keep the units on stream and what is our throughput at the end of the day. We're also looking in metrics at how many models built versus problems solved. And it's kind of hard to justify spending more money if you're not actually solving any problems. Looking at ROI justification, it's very important, especially if you're starting an economic downturn. I know that we're actually looking at EBITDA and how do we improve production by recognizing errors before they're happening and intervening so we can actually have longer on-stream time. And then also we have to track over years to prove that this actually works and is successful. When we talked about sustainability, we got off on a different track. It's about how do we use digital transformation in order to make a better world. And so we talked about how it's important for agriculture and bees and recycling of plastics and reusing of raw materials.
Great, thank you. All right. I see there was a group in the back, so that'd be an easy transition.
Are you ready?
Sure. There we go.
Okay, a lot of the same things that have already been mentioned, we talked about. In terms of constraints, though, I'm going to sort of use an organizing principle, the same one Jonathan used around people, process, and technology, because I think I use it all the time anyway. It's a great organizing construct. But in terms of the people, it's a bunch of things that I think other people mentioned. First of all, it's just number of people, availability, the right skill set, and having people who are sort of quote unquote dedicated versus fighting the daily fires from an operational perspective. Technology side, things like legacy IT infrastructure that was already mentioned, being able to support all this new technology. Is that available or not? The group was at different stages in terms of where they were in their digital journeys. One mentioned that the lack of a sort of a vision touch point, they'd just been acquired. the new owner said go do digital, but didn't give much of a new vision around it. So sort of at a loss of where they go. In terms of sort of the process side, one thing we touched on was sort of the intersection of IT and OT. IT folks may not necessarily understand what a data historian does or the processes behind it, and therefore there's a disconnect. And obviously cybersecurity was another one as well. That's a potential. As you try and scale, do you have the ability to make sure everything is secure? So those were the constraints. In terms of using digital transformation to improve responsive to customers, a lot of it was around what had been mentioned, sort of getting information quicker to the customers when they need it. BHP mentioned the ability to give customers real-time information and then being able to sort of change the supply chain, reroute shipments very quickly where they didn't have that responsiveness before. Also mentioned was offering new digital services to some of your customers who may not have them. Albemarle mentioned they were doing some of that in terms of analytics services. I know Air Products, we have a platform we call Process MD that we offer as a service to some of our customers, third-party customers. So there's those types of initiatives as well. The metrics are all the same ones that other folks have mentioned: cost, speed to market, ROI. How important is ROI justification? Well, ultimately, it is what matters for most companies. From a strategic place, in order to gain approvals, I think some of these have already been mentioned: benchmarking, making sure people are educated and understanding the value proposition. And then finally, from a sustainability factor, we really didn't get to this from a question perspective, but from a long-term perspective, digital may be the key sustaining factor for all of our businesses. We may not exist if we don't adopt these transformations and technologies. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay. So now you get to take a hike to the other side of the room. Because I think that's these four, and then you got those two over there. So which one of you guys want to go first? Oh, got a hand.
All righty, go ahead and run through these. I'll try not to copy the ones that we already talked about several times already. For number one, what limits the ability for a digital transition or digital technology? We talked about cultures already. I think acquisitions is one in particular. A lot of companies were acquired, don't really know what the strategy is. Issues around location. A lot of times, facilities are located around the world, has different drivers. We mentioned already value case assessments. There are also IT limits, right? What your infrastructure can support. And another one that came up a couple of times is external consultants, right? A lot of times those will insert themselves in the higher level parts of the company and really kind of drive probably more technology variation than maybe the organization can support. Next one was on how does your organization respond to digital transformation around customers? And a couple of things that I think many of us have noticed here is customers really demand real-time data streaming now of what you're sending, which maybe wasn't the case before. In a case, maybe it could have been quarterly or annual communications of quality data. Now they want it real time. And let me see. And that brings up questions around data security, as you're sending or receiving that. And also, real-time reporting of maybe contracts, POs, or inventory, things like that with customers, right? Things that we didn't necessarily see before. Status of those, reviews, things of that nature. Next one is around, what sort of metrics do you measure? You got your standard KPIs. I don't think there's much different here that we talked about speed of implementation. I think the expectation is things go faster. Projects, things of that nature. So I think speed was one. If you look at, how important ROI is and justification and what strategies do you use to approve. We mentioned one that trial, justify, and leverage, right? Use that approach. That's if you're using more of a top-down approach, that you do a couple of trials, you prove it out, justify it once, and then you leverage and don't worry about really proving ROI at every implementation afterwards. You do that one time just to get things going. It also helps with long-term support because it allows you to have one common model across your entire asset base. And the next one down here is how does sustainability factor in initiatives? We talked a little bit about the need for having a standard solution. It's kind of a double-edged sword, right? I mean, it does allow you to have one tool that you can support at a global level, without having multiple tools. And in this day and age, it really gets to be something you can't do anymore. You can't support, if you got 20 facilities, you can't support 15 different tools. You really have to have a standard tool set. To do that, you need to make sure you have a unified vision, that everybody is thinking and going the same direction. Then, of course, you don't want to stifle new innovations. So you really need to still keep open for that mindset of trials and things like that going on at singular facilities.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Okay, last but not least.
I'll be quick. Number one, what issues limited your ability to scale the DT initiatives? We spoke to organizational structure, going from a distributed to a centralized command and control. It seemed to be difficult. Lots of people have ideas and difficult to try to hone those down and keep them, to actually implementation and limiting the variations after the selection was made. Let's see, training and people, a lot of common things that others have said. Infrastructure, which was also mentioned earlier. Number two, how does your organization use digital transformation for customers' responsiveness? We had an example in the pharmaceutical industry where digital techniques were used to track some of the, I'll assume it's medicine, through the entire manufacturing supply chain all the way to the pharmacy to determine things like temperature ranges through logistical measures. We had another example of, which I think is similar to some of these others, where if a customer is complaining, then one of our team members sends a data scientist with the ability to do some of the machine learning with some of the customer data to determine whether the issue is with the supplier or the customer. Number three, in terms of metrics, used basically gathering a portfolio of proof of concepts and tried to understand which ones were needing to be corrected, reporting on. Seemed to be some inconsistency between various business units, and so having a central portfolio seemed to help. Obviously, ROI was important and requiring a hard dollar savings. Number four, we got into how you do ROI when you do not have a revenue stream in terms of sort of the difference between minimizing cost and maximizing value, and some challenges that we've seen internally. One of the examples was we tried to treat it like an internal startup concept and tried to show the value so you didn't go down the downward spiral of the minimizing of cost. Challenges on capital versus operating budget and how you treat that value stream over time. Also had some issues with multiple organizations choosing up to 4 different solutions of which any of them could be used. However, trying to focus on at least one, even if it's not the optimized answer, so that there's consistency. The other item is that the digital transformation tools may not of themselves be a actual initiative, but part of an initiative, and that makes it easier to implement when it's part of an entire bucket. Finally, with sustainability, we ran out of time, but often it's easier to justify the sustainability when there's cost benefit associated. Thanks.
Great. Greg, at this point, are we on a break? No, sorry. Let's see. Next slide. You want to take that? Hi, thanks. So next thing on our agenda, well, we've got a couple of things. We had planned for a break. We could do it, but I think we might just forego the break. This would be a good time if anybody wants to take a personal break. But what we want to do now is take a few minutes and talk about the steering committee here in the Digital Transformation Council. But before I do that, thanks everybody for participating in the questions session. I thought there were a lot of good insights there. So that's terrific. If there were some questions that you think we should have asked but did not ask, we're going to have another session, kind of an open discussion session later this afternoon. So you can think about those, and we'll let you enter those and vote on those, and we can have an open discussion with the whole group this afternoon. So it'll be a little bit different format, but we're going to try it that way. So think about that. So next, let's talk about steering committee. And for that, I'm going to invite Mike Guilfoyle back up to the podium to kick that off.